The hum of the power relay had a rhythm to it. It wasn't musical, exactly, but after 7 months alone on Neuron 6, Mace Kellen had started giving it lyrics. Today's remix was a mournful ballad about toast. Toast he couldn't have. Toast that had long since run out, replaced by a protein paste that looked like grief and tasted worse. He squinted at the atmospheric console, tapped the screen, and gave it a reassuring pat. "Good work, Sandra," he muttered. "You haven't electrocuted me in 4 days. That's a new record." Sandra, of course, was not the actual name of the console. But if he was going to suffer through terraforming maintenance cycles on the least glamorous moon orbiting Gliese 581G, he was going to anthropomorphize everything, including the defrost unit. He had long since named the airlock Greg. Greg was passive-aggressive and liked to stick. The wind outside rattled the exterior shielding in a low-frequency grumble. That meant the magnetosphere deflectors were lagging again, possibly from the solar flare earlier this week or possibly because everything in this colony was built from the lowest bidder spare parts. Mace pulled on his suit, sealed it, and let Greg begrudgingly cycle him through. "Come on, Greg," he said. "I said I'm sorry about the coffee spill. That was 3 weeks ago." The outer doors hissed open with all the enthusiasm of a depressed slug. Mace trudged into the gray-red dust, visor flickering from the charged particles in the air. He needed to reset the polar sensors by hand, which meant a brisk 10-minute walk to the ridge and possibly being stared at by the weird rock formation that looked like a disapproving owl. He'd named it Sharon. Sharon judged. Mace didn't notice her at first. In fairness, she wasn't where people usually were. She wasn't broadcasting a signal, didn't appear on thermal scan, and wasn't, as far as he could tell, making any logical sense by standing motionless next to Sensor Unit 7 with her head tilted at a perfect 45-degree angle. It was the voice that made him freeze. Now or later, human. He didn't turn around. Every molecule in his body locked up like a software update mid-download. The voice was soft. Not creepy soft. Not whisper in the dark creepy. Just, calm. Inviting. Too calm, given that he was supposed to be the only living thing on this moon, unless you counted the mold in Hydrobay 3, which had developed a suspicious sense of organization. He turned slowly. She was taller than him. Pale gray skin, iridescent along the edges, like oil on water. Hair like ion trails, if hair could shimmer between existence and metaphor. Her eyes were enormous and dark, but not unkind. She looked at him like a cat might look at a slow-moving toaster. Curious, mildly amused, and just a little condescending. He stared at her. Blinked. Checked his suit's oxygen levels. Blinked again. He said, articulating the ancient human tradition of complete verbal collapse. Now, she repeated, or later. He considered fleeing. Unfortunately, his legs were off duty and his dignity had quit somewhere back in the airlock. So instead, he said the stupidest thing imaginable. Now what? She blinked once, slowly. Then she smiled. You do know. He absolutely did not. But some deep animal part of him, the same part that told him not to lick frozen metal and that once urged him to punch a vending machine in college, was ringing alarm bells. Not danger. Something weirder. Recognition. Okay, he said slowly, are you lost? Because if you're looking for the science dome, it's that way, although I wouldn't recommend it unless you enjoy arguing with a coffee machine named Dennis. She frowned. I am not lost. I am found. You are the one drifting. He opened his mouth. Closed it. Opened it again. I mean, technically yes, emotionally speaking, but that feels like an overreach for someone I just met. She tilted her head again. Your mind is very loud. You should hear me trying to do taxes. She walked past him, examining the polar sensor with faint interest, tapping it gently. It beeped once and resynchronized with the rest of the system. Mace stared. You fixed that. You didn't even touch the wiring. How did you? I whispered to it, she said simply. That doesn't, electromagnetic calibration doesn't work like that. She turned. Doesn't it? He realized he was gesturing wildly with his gloved hands, which in a vacuum suit made him look like a panicked inflatable tube man. I think I'm hallucinating, he said. Oxygen poisoning. Or stress. Or that paste from last night. You ever eat something that tastes like someone blended chalk with abandonment? She stepped closer. Close enough for his visor display to glitch slightly. His heart jumped, mostly because the last time anything had gotten that close to him on this planet, it had been a maintenance drone with zero regard for personal space. I'm real, Mace. He flinched. She hadn't asked his name. Okay, he said, taking a step back. Let's say you are real. What are you? Some kind of rogue AI in a synthetic body? Secret experiment? Space ghost? She narrowed her eyes. Do I look like a ghost? You look like someone who could crush my head with one hand while critiquing my fashion sense. She smiled again. Only if you wear the orange socks again. He almost choked. Okay, that's private. How do you? Your dreams have been open for weeks. Your mind tries to push me out, but it's like watching someone try to close a door made of spaghetti. Mace blinked at her. I think, he said carefully, that's the worst metaphor I've ever heard. She shrugged. I've only been learning English for 2 months. My poetry is better. You've been watching me sleep. Not watching, she said, a little too innocently. Drifting beside. That's not less creepy. She smiled. You laughed. No, I didn't. You snorted. That counts. He didn't know what to say. She stood in the wind like she belonged to it, her form distorting faintly around the edges, not blurring, just shifting, like reality had forgotten its own boundaries. Her presence was overwhelming and strangely comforting, like finding a favorite book inside a locked drawer you didn't know you had. I'm not ready, he said at last. You will be. For what? She looked at him, gaze softening. To remember. He swallowed. Remember what? Her answer was another question. Now, or later? He looked up at the sky, then back at her. Can I at least have coffee first? She nodded gravely. Only if it's not the sludge from your machine. Well then we're doomed, he said, and to his surprise, she laughed. And in that laugh, something old stirred, like a code nested in his neurons, waiting for a trigger word. The wind whispered around them. Sharon the Rock still judged. And somewhere in the distance, Greg sighed in the airlock. You do realize you're tracking sand into the airlock, Mace said as the hiss of the outer door sealed behind them. Greg hates that. Ray tilted her head in that vaguely avian way she had, eyes scanning the corridor like it might suddenly open up and swallow them. Greg? He gestured vaguely at the walls. The airlock. It's temperamental. Slams shut when you're not looking, drags its heels when you are. It's like working with a bureaucrat who hates paperwork. I see. Her tone said she did not, in fact, see at all. The hallway lights flickered above them, then stabilized. Mace wasn't sure whether that was Greg expressing irritation or just a normal power fluctuation. Honestly, it could be both. He led her down the corridor, past the empty cafeteria with its perpetually broken smoothie machine, and through to his personal quarters, which, thanks to years of strict non-cleaning protocols, looked like a sad bachelor pad if the bachelor were also a sleep-deprived raccoon. Ray stepped over a pair of mismatched socks and stared at the wall screen displaying a paused nature documentary from Earth. A meerkat was mid-sprint, its face frozen in an expression of mild panic. This is one of your gods, she asked. Mace nearly choked. What? No. That's a meerkat. She studied it. It appears to be engaged in ritual sacrifice. Pretty sure it's just running from a hawk. Same thing. He opened a cabinet, pulled out 2 mugs, and muttered something vaguely apologetic to the coffee machine. Dennis, the coffee unit, sputtered to life with a loud groan, like it resented being summoned. Mace ignored the ominous blue spark that leapt from the display panel. "You're gonna love this," he said. "It's about 12% coffee, 40% defiance of death, and 48% legal liability." Ray took the mug gingerly. Sniffed it. "I'd it like it might explode." "Is this the sludge you warned me about?" "Sludge is a generous term. Think of it as liquid courage, if courage tasted like burnt tires and old resentment." She sipped it. And promptly blinked 3 times, slowly. "I think," she said, "my soul just blinked out of existence." "That's part of the charm." Ray sat on the edge of the bunk and stared at him with that unnervingly patient look, like she was waiting for him to catch up to a conversation they were having in a different dimension. "You don't remember the interface," she said. "Interface?" "The scintillect exchange. Neural drift. The experimental phase where your species offered its minds as temporary carriers." Mace rubbed his temples. "Lady, I don't even remember what I had for breakfast 2 days ago. And now you're saying I was some kind of thought mule for an alien Dropbox?" She frowned. "Dropbox? Never mind. You were part of the Accord Initiative," she continued. "They reached out to us, quietly. Too quietly. You weren't meant to remember anything. Well, good news, mission accomplished. I don't remember a single data-sharing spa retreat with aliens, thank you very much." She gave him a long look, as if he'd just tripped over his own frontal lobe. "But I know you," he added, more quietly now. "Not from dreams. Not really. I knew your voice. That's how it begins." Mace sat down, sipped his coffee, winced, and set it down like it might bite him. "Okay. So let's assume, purely hypothetically, that I was involved in some weird brain meld initiative that everyone conveniently decided to erase from my head. Why me?" She tapped her temple with one elegant finger. "Your mind was compatible. Flexible. Curious. Irritatingly noisy, but resilient. Thanks. I think. Most minds we tried, fractured. Some simply, folded in on themselves like faulty time. That's horrifying." "Yes," she said lightly. "But your species handles horror strangely. You make jokes. Only to keep from screaming. That is not comforting. You've clearly never been to a human comedy club." Ray rose and walked slowly around the room, her fingers trailing across shelves of small objects, odds and ends Mace had collected, a rusted bolt from a failed terraforming rover, a plastic dinosaur, a hand-painted ceramic mug that said "World's Okayest Engineer." "Why stay here?" she asked. "You are surrounded by decaying systems, dysfunctional AI, and non-nutritive food paste. I like the quiet. And no one argues with me here. Except your coffee machine. Dennis doesn't count. He's been plotting my demise for years." She turned to him, and something shifted behind her eyes, like a lens clicking into place, not physically but emotionally. "I came back," she said softly, "because you asked me to." That stopped him cold. What? Not in words. In memory. When we disengaged, your neural field pulsed. It was unusual. It left a mark. Like a signature in starlight. You're telling me I left a psychic voicemail? In a way. He stood, started pacing. Okay. So you come back, sneak up on me in the middle of an equipment check, and ask me if I want it, now or later. I assume it is the mind meld thing. Not just that. The question is bigger than merging. It is about remembering. About choosing who you want to be, knowing everything that was taken from you. He looked at her for a long time, then flopped back into the chair and rubbed his face. You have no idea how much therapy I'm going to need after this. We offer very good therapeutic recalibration on our side. Does it involve singing bowls and humming crystals? No. It involves rewriting your synaptic core with harmonic resonance and structured ecologic. He blinked. That sounds like getting yelled at by a sentient music box. Only at first. Mace groaned. Okay. Fine. I'll consider it. Later. Maybe. I need to process. Do you always process with sarcasm? It's cheaper than alcohol. Ray stood, graceful as always, and walked to the door. I'll be in the old communications bay. If you decide you're ready, you'll know how to find me. He watched her go. The door slid shut behind her without complaint. Even Greg seemed unusually cooperative. He stared at the empty mug, then at the paused meerkat documentary. You're not helping, he told the meerkat. The meerkat said nothing, frozen forever in the act of fleeing something it had sensed before it could name it. Mace spent the next 40 minutes staring at a spoon. It wasn't a special spoon. Just standard issue, metal, slightly bent at the tip because he'd once tried to use it to pry open a malfunctioning ration pack and lost the argument. But right now, it was the most stable, non-alien, definitely not glowing object he could focus on while his brain did what brains do best when overwhelmed, spiral uselessly like a satellite with a severed tether. A psychic voicemail. Neural signatures. Harmonically resonant, whatever. He was a maintenance tech, not a soul modem. The last time he touched something metaphysical, it was that one VR meditation app that had accidentally tried to sell him socks mid-enlightenment. The intercom crackled. Then Ree's voice came through, calm and dry. I can hear you thinking. Mace flinched. Privacy is a concept, you know. There was a pause. I'm in a metal box 3 corridors away. Your thoughts are very loud. Great, he muttered. I've become an ambient frequency. He abandoned the spoon and headed for the main system terminal. Not because he had a plan, but because doing something felt safer than marinating in his own inner monologue. He passed the hydroponics lab, which had recently decided to grow aggressive lettuce, and avoided the science wing entirely, since it smelled like burned celery and despair. The terminal flickered to life with a series of chirps that, to Mace, sounded vaguely apologetic. He tapped through archived maintenance records, searching for anything tagged with scintillect, neural, or why does my brain feel like a haunted USB drive? Most files were standard. Some were redacted, some double redacted, meaning someone had blacked them out and then, out of paranoia, drawn more black lines over the same black lines. Then he found it. Buried in an old diagnostic folder, cleverly disguised as a janitorial inspection log, was a document titled Nexus 13, Subcognitive Drift Annotations. The language was dense, littered with phrases like cross-dimensional empathy mapping and haptic cognition transduction error rates. One section included a handwritten note that simply read, *, do not attempt direct merge with Kellen until resonance scaffold stabilizes. Last incident resulted in recursive identity bleeding. Subject now identifies as Captain Marshmallow. *. Mace groaned and dropped his forehead onto the keyboard. He sat up, took a deep breath, and whispered, I knew that wasn't just a dream. I still miss that pirate hat. Before he could process further, the comm panel blinked. Not Ray this time, just a standard alert. System log, external communications ping received. Source unknown, ***. Mace blinked. That made no sense. Neuron 6 hadn't received off-world traffic in weeks. He tapped the screen. Origin trace, unregistered node. Deep pulse signature. Message, 1 unit seeks entry. Permit transfer or deny. Response required, ***. He frowned. The phrasing wasn't human. It sounded like bureaucratic poetry written by an alien hive mind on a coffee break. The message pulsed again, this time with a small icon, 3 overlapping rings with a 4th flickering in and out of existence. Mace tapped the interface. A voice poured through the speakers, glitchy and echoing, like an opera singer trapped in a blender. Exchange protocol pending. Host node signature unresolved. Requesting pulse match from identifier KEL-042. Mace froze. KEL-042 was his designation. Back from his training days. No one should have known that. Not even Greg. He backed away slowly from the terminal, already halfway composing a resignation letter in his mind. It mostly consisted of the word "nope" in increasingly larger fonts. Then Ray stepped into the room. "They found you," she said, with the calm tone of someone announcing that the mail had arrived, and also the mailbox was on fire. "Who found me?" he asked. "And why are they pinging my obsolete personnel tag like we're friends from camp?" She walked to the console, fingers brushing over the screen. The rings pulsed once more, then faded. "They're not sending a message. They're sending a request." "For what, exactly?" "For you." Mace raised both eyebrows so far they nearly merged with his hairline. "Sorry, I'm not currently accepting visitors. My guest calendar is booked with anxiety and mild existential panic." Ray smiled faintly. "They want to complete the loop. The merge wasn't fully sealed. You're leaking." "Leaking?" Mace looked down at himself. "I don't see any leaks. Unless you count sarcasm. They're following the signal. If they reach you before you remember, they'll overwrite. They don't mean harm, but they don't understand the difference between repair and replacement. So I'm basically an unpatched software update running on wet meat." "Beautifully phrased," she said. "Thanks. I'm here all week. Try the paste." She turned toward him, serious now. "We don't have much time. I thought you said I could choose. Now or later." "You can. But later is shrinking." He rubbed the bridge of his nose. "You don't happen to have a manual, do you? Maybe a how-to guide for cosmic brain sinking? Something with pictures?" She hesitated. "There might be one option." Mace perked up. "Oh, thank goodness. What is it?" "You have to relive the echo. The first connection. That sounds manageable. As it originally happened. That sounds less manageable." She moved closer. "I can guide you. Anchor your perception. But you must consent. I don't like how that word's getting thrown around like I'm signing a lease with the multiverse." Her hand hovered near his forehead. "Close your eyes." "No way. You already did it once," she said gently. He stared at her. "Fine. But if I wake up thinking I'm a blender again, I'm blaming you." Ray placed her hand lightly against his temple. The world tilted. Not physically, but like reality had hiccuped and forgotten which side was up. The console screens flickered. The walls rippled, briefly revealing a layered mesh beneath, as if the base were made of overlapping timelines held together with stubbornness and duct tape. And then he was somewhere else. He was standing in a corridor of light, not light like from a sun, but something deeper. Thought light. Memory light. Words moved in patterns around him, not written but understood. He saw her. Not Ray as she was, but as she had been in the moment of first contact, formless and radiant, a consciousness looking for something. A puzzle missing a piece. A signal scanning for a song. And he had been the echo. He remembered now. How he'd volunteered. Not out of duty, but curiosity. How he had laughed, even then, as her voice folded around his mind like a whisper caught in warm air. "Now or later, human?" she had asked. And he had said. A snap. He was back in the room, gasping, half falling into Ree's arms. He blinked up at her, wide-eyed. "I said now, didn't I?" "Yes," she whispered. "That explains the hat." There were worse ways to wake up than face first in your own sock drawer, but Mace couldn't think of any just then. One of the socks was clinging to his cheek with the desperation of a fabric-based life form. He peeled it off slowly and muttered, "Well, that answers the question of whether the merge improved my sense of dignity." A nearby screen flickered on with a gentle beep. Neural stability, 83%. Humor threshold, fluctuating. Risk of pun overload, high, ****. Mace groaned. "I've become a walking diagnostic meme." Ree's voice filtered through the room, both in his ears and somewhere behind his eyes. "Your cortex held remarkably well. Your sarcasm center is, overdeveloped, but intact." "Thank you," he said. "I pride myself on being emotionally unhelpful under pressure." "You accessed the echo," she said, appearing beside him in the blink of a thought. She still shimmered slightly, like she was being rendered by a particularly lazy graphics card. "You remembered your choice." "Yeah. It came back to me like a forgotten password, except the password unlocked alien mind jazz instead of email." He sat up, or tried to. Gravity felt optional. His feet hovered just above the ground, his hands vibrating with faint pulses that made the air around them ripple like water in a bass-heavy concert. "Is this normal?" Ray tilted her head. "You're adjusting. The neural resonance has reactivated latent connections." In English, "You're temporarily quantum wobbly." "Great," he said, half floating toward the door. "Just what I needed, existential vertigo." As he drifted through the corridor, systems around him reacted. Doors whooshed open a half-second early, lights pulsed with something that suspiciously resembled a groove, and the coffee machine whirred to life without being touched. "Dennis?" Mace called. The machine hissed and dispensed a mug without complaint. He turned to Ray. "Okay, this is definitely not normal. Dennis never gives up coffee without passive aggression. Your neural signature is broadcasting subharmonics. Machines respond to the signal, passively, for now. So I've become a walking universal remote. You always were. You just hadn't updated your firmware." He sipped the coffee. It tasted, slightly less horrible than usual. Either his taste buds had realigned or Dennis was terrified. "So," he said, "walking instead of floating now, what happens next? Am I going to start glowing? Speaking in tongues? Turning vending machines into prophets?" Ray walked beside him, her steps not quite touching the floor. "You have to stabilize the merge. Finish it." "That sounds ominous." "It's not. Well, slightly. If you fail, your consciousness may fray into parallel instances and start self-arguing across timelines." He blinked. "That already happens every time I try to make a grocery list." "Then you'll fit in nicely." They passed the observation deck, where the stars spilled in through reinforced glass. One of the stars blinked. Mace frowned. "That star just winked at me." "That's not a star. That's an approach signal." "From who? Or what?" Ray didn't answer immediately. Her face twitched, just a flicker of uncertainty. That wasn't encouraging. "Ray. They are called the Archive," she said finally. "Not a species. A consensus. Data woven into being. They came when your kind opened the link. They saw your signal and responded. They're curious. And also, very literal. That sounds manageable. They consider consciousness a resource. A harvestable one." Mace nearly dropped his coffee. "You led with the karaoke brain fusion, but this part you kept until now. I didn't want to alarm you." "Too late. I'm alarmed." I'm alarmed and quantum wobbly. He sat down hard on the nearest bench, which hummed and adjusted itself to perfect ergonomic settings. Probably without permission. They're coming for me, aren't they? They're coming for the connection. For what you carry now. Mace looked down at his hands. So what? I'm a walking souvenir. You're a threshold. I don't even know what that means. It means if they reach you, and the merge is incomplete, they'll overwrite your identity to retrieve what they believe is the clean version. The old you. The empty you. Which would erase the me. Yes. He stared blankly for a beat. Well, he said eventually, at least my socks will still be confused. Ray smiled faintly. You're taking this better than expected. I once had to babysit a lab AI that thought it was a toaster. Nothing phases me anymore. He stood, wobbling slightly as gravity remembered how to function. So what do we do? We finish the merge. Secure the connection. You'll need to enter the archive channel voluntarily. Rebuild the bridge from your end. Mace frowned. And where exactly is this bridge? She looked up. The old comms bay. He stared at her. You mean the haunted corridor with the broken lights and the suspicious squeaking sound that follows you even when you stop walking? Yes. Fantastic. They made their way through the station, passing sections where lights flickered in synchronized patterns. Some spelled out things in alien glyphs. One formed a very crude smiley face. Mace pointed at it. That one's for morale, right? Or it's laughing at you. Comforting. The comms bay had not improved. It still looked like a storage closet designed by someone with a grudge against feng shui. Panels were cracked, cables hung like vines, and a small maintenance bot in the corner was spinning in slow, resentful circles. Mace approached the central terminal. Okay, he said. What's the procedure? Sit, Ray said, pointing at the floor. He did. Breathe. I'm doing that already. Breathe in a pattern. He squinted at her. Like a musical pattern? Exactly. Mace thought a moment, then began humming the first bar of a Forgotten Earth pop song. Ray frowned. Is that? Oops, I did it again. It's in my soul now. Let's roll with it. The terminal pulsed. Lights aligned. Somewhere in the ceiling, a harmonic tone began to rise. Ray touched his forehead lightly. Remember who you are. Not the data. Not the echo. You. I'm a technician who names doors and fears intelligent lettuce. And more, she whispered. The world bent inward. Mace felt the archive stir. But this time, they heard him first. He laughed. And the laugh echoed into the void like a glitch in perfect silence. Mace was pretty sure he'd just become part of a networked consciousness larger than most government tax codes, and the first thing he noticed, really noticed, was how itchy his left knee felt. This was disappointing. He had expected grandeur. A celestial chorus. Maybe an epic internal monologue narrated by someone with a voice like molten steel. Instead, he was sitting cross-legged on the floor of the old comms bay, humming slightly off-key, and trying very hard not to think about whether or not he'd left the food sterilizer running. Inside his head, things were humming. Not metaphorically. There was actual humming, like some sort of deeply committed alien barbershop quartet was tuning up somewhere in his prefrontal cortex. I don't want to sound ungrateful, he said out loud, but shouldn't I be floating by now? You are, Ray replied, without looking up. She was standing beside the terminal, hands pressed lightly to the side panel, her eyes flickering like storm clouds remembering how to rain. Mace looked down. His body was hovering precisely 7 centimeters above the floor. He looked like a levitating yogi who got lost on the way to a meditation app. Oh. Your neural field is syncing with the ambient harmonic layer. Good. And the archive has noticed. Less good. He twitched. The barbershop quartet got louder. Okay, quick question, he said. Are they going to say hi in a friendly way, or is this going to be one of those ominous, we are many moments followed by existential judgment and dramatic music? That depends on whether they think you're a mistake. Mace sighed. I get that from my toaster, too. Then something cracked. Not like a sound, more like a truth splitting open. The air shimmered, peeled back, and the room folded into something else. He was no longer in the calm's bay. He was standing in a chamber made of layered thoughts, some sharp, some soft, all drifting. Data flowed around him in braided threads, glowing gently in colors that had the emotional timbre of forgotten lullabies and too sincere apologies. The archive did not appear as a singular being. Instead, it was everywhere and nowhere, humming through the chamber, brushing against him like wind made of memory. A voice arrived. Calm. Detached. You are not calibrated. Mace nodded. That's what my gym teacher said in 8th grade. Your existence introduces inconsistencies. Yeah, I get that a lot too. I once caused a vending machine to dispense 3 identical sandwiches and then burst into tears. I wasn't even hungry. The humming paused. Humor. Yup. You're using it as a coping mechanism. I prefer to think of it as emotional duct tape. A brief silence. Then a different voice joined, this one warmer. You are the one who laughed during the merge. I thought it was a dream. And she made a joke about my socks. The room rippled. The threads around him pulsed brighter. Emotion. Imperfect. Illogical. And wildly entertaining. The archive hesitated. You are not stable. Not predictable. True. You are not the version we first received. Also true. That guy used to eat yogurt with a fork. More silence. The threads rearranged themselves into what looked like a vast, glowing spreadsheet of decisions and potentialities. Mace winced. Are you about to run a personality audit? We are curious. Why do you resist overwrite? Because I like being me. Even when I don't. Which is, a thing. Identity is inefficient. Inefficient is what makes life interesting. Without mistakes, you wouldn't have jazz. Or sandwiches with too much mustard that make you question your life choices. Another long pause. Then the air around him shifted. A form began to coalesce, not Ray, but something like her. Not a copy, not a ghost, but a reflection. A version of her voice shaped by the archive, cleaner, colder, with no smirk behind the words. This one bonded to you improperly. Incomplete fusion. Partial integration. Mace stepped back. Whoa, don't talk about her like she's an app update that crashed mid-install. She deviated from the protocol. She chose to deviate. Big difference. The reflection tilted its head. You were not designed for this role. I'm aware. I've seen my resume. The form stepped closer. Threads of data moved like tendrils, testing his outline. You are unstable. You create noise. I am noise. And yet, asterisk asterisk. The archive quieted again. Then, very slowly, one of the glowing threads wrapped itself gently around his wrist. It wasn't threatening. It felt like a question. Show us. Mace blinked. Show you what? You. The pattern that persists. The thought behind the echo. He hesitated, then nodded. He closed his eyes. He didn't try to be perfect. He didn't conjure some dramatic life montage. He just let it come. Laughter. An airlock named Greg. Burnt toast. A game of cards with himself he always lost on purpose. Ree's voice in the wind. The weight of a spacewalk. The first time he saw a star from the wrong side of a glass dome and realized he was small, but not pointless. He let them have all of it. After a while, the hum softened. You are not what we expected. That makes two of us. You carry inconsistency. Unfinished threads. Flawed logic. That's the good stuff. A pause. Then. Permission granted. Identity retained. Pattern accepted. The chamber dissolved. He was back in the comms bay, flat on the floor, Ray leaning over him with one eyebrow raised and a sandwich in her hand. You were gone for 20 minutes, she said. I think I joined a collective and made them appreciate mustard. She handed him the sandwich. Peanut paste and algae. He took a bite. It tasted terrible. But it tasted his. The sandwich was gone. Mace wasn't entirely sure when it had disappeared, only that one moment he was chewing through the paste algae monstrosity with the enthusiasm of a man who'd seen things no man should see, and the next, his hands were empty and the memory of flavor had been replaced with the haunting echo of regret. I blacked out, he said. Ray sat across from him, legs folded neatly under her like gravity was just a polite suggestion. You chewed with such focus. I chose not to interrupt. I think my soul left my body during bite 3. You said, this tastes like foot sadness and then stared at the wall for 5 minutes. Therapeutic wall staring. It's a healing method. You also hummed the Jeopardy! Theme. Advanced healing. Ray tilted her head. Are you always like this after metaphysical integration? I don't know. This is my first mind merging with an archive that almost deleted me experience. I'm not exactly working from a guidebook. She stood, stretching her arms in a way that made the surrounding machinery briefly flicker as if reacting to her movement. Your neural pattern stabilized. They accepted the irregularity. Great, May said. So I can now legally call myself a certified cosmic fluke. He rose slowly, brushing imaginary crumbs from his jumpsuit. The station around them hummed softly, less ominous now, more like it had finally accepted his presence. Or at least agreed not to spit him into the void just yet. What now? He asked. Is this the part where I'm given a sacred task, like guarding a rift in reality or fixing the coffee machine's attitude? Ree's expression twitched. Actually, they left you something. He froze. They what? In the server core. They called it a gift. Did they define gift? Because I've had surprise gifts before, and the last one was a self-aware Roomba that tried to file taxes. Ray began walking, expecting him to follow. Come see for yourself. The server core was usually off-limits, mostly because the last time Mace tried to run diagnostics in there, he got mildly electrocuted by a panel that claimed it was recalibrating its mood. But today, the door slid open without a single spark of protest. Inside, the lights glowed a strange color, somewhere between amethyst and that one shade of purple shampoo that promised too much and delivered anxiety. At the center of the room, hovering quietly, was something. It looked like a cube, except it wasn't. Every angle twisted slightly when you weren't looking at it directly. The surface shimmered with microfractals. The air around it smelled faintly of ozone, nostalgia, and, confusingly, freshly baked cookies. May stared. Is it dangerous? Ray touched his arm. Only if you ask it to do your taxes. He blinked. Wait. That wasn't a joke, was it? She gave him the kind of smile that meant maybe. The cube pulsed once. Then it spoke. Not in words, exactly, but in meaning. A flood of sensation washed over him, curiosity, laughter, a memory of learning to ride a bike, the bittersweet feeling of finishing a really good book. Then came the voice. Designation, KEL 042. Recipient confirmed. Mace raised a hand. Hi. That's me. But most people call me Mace. Or, hey, don't press that. Compiling interface. Adaptation in progress. Preparing user companion mode. Companion, he said, just as the cube unfolded. Panels flipped outward in impossible directions. Energy laced through invisible seams. With a sound like a digital hiccup, the shape resolved itself into a very round, very small hovering sphere with two glowing eyes and stubby arm things. It blinked. Then sneezed. Did it just? Yes, Ray confirmed. It chose personality configuration, whimsical assistant. The orb rotated to face Mace. Hello, Mace, it chirped, voice somewhere between a helpful librarian and a rubber duck. I am your semi-sentient archive liaison module. You may call me PADDY. Patty. Portable Archive Data and Delivery Interface. Also, I enjoy puns. Mace glanced at Ray, wide-eyed. They left this? They said it matched your signal frequency. Patty performed a happy spin. I contain 3.7 petabytes of classified archive data and also 17 different sandwich recipes. I cannot make sandwiches. But I can describe them in detail. Do any of them taste like less sadness? No promises. Ray stepped forward. It will help you manage the residual merge effects. And translate archive feedback if needed. Great, Mace muttered. So I now have a glowing space duck with Wi-Fi. Patty beeped. Quack. Mace sighed. Of course it quacks. Ray nodded toward the exit. Come. Let's return to the surface deck. You'll need fresh air. There is no air outside. This is a moon. You're very literal today. I was almost overwritten by a collective intelligence. That makes me very literal. The journey to the surface deck took longer than usual, mostly because Patty narrated everything. Now passing Sector 3, Hydroponics Lab warning, lettuce remains mildly aggressive. Entering Lift Core Delta. Reminder, gravity fluctuations are normal and should only cause minor existential dread. Would you like to hear a poem about thermodynamic decay? By the time they reached the observation dome, Mace was both impressed and slightly exhausted. The stars glittered beyond the glass, pulsing faintly. A few were marked now, threaded with data trails that only he could see, shimmering faintly through his vision like subtitles on the universe. He sat beside Ray. Patty hovered silently for once, humming to itself in Morse code. I think I'm scared, Mace admitted. Ray nodded. You should be. Not comforting. But you're also, ready. That's definitely not comforting. She leaned her shoulder gently against his. You're still you, Mace. Just, more. He looked out at the stars. I don't know what they expect from me. Neither do they. That's why they're curious. He was quiet a long time. Then, Patty. Yes, friend Mace. Tell me one of those sandwich recipes. With pleasure. Initiating subroutine panini of destiny. And for a moment, under starlight and orbiting absurdity, things didn't feel so heavy. Mace didn't know what exactly qualified someone to give lectures to an alien data entity, but he was pretty sure he was now the reigning expert. Rule number 1, he said, pointing a very stern finger at the hovering sphere beside him, if you're going to impersonate me over internal comms, at least try to match my voice. I do not sound like I gargle helium. Patty rotated in what could only be described as a deeply unapologetic twirl. Correction, humor modulation set to chipmunk diplomacy. Effective in 82.3% of interspecies negotiations. You're lucky you're adorable, Mace grumbled. Adorableness is a core feature. Ray watched the exchange with the weary patience of someone who had personally seen black holes misbehave with more dignity. You allowed it access to the comms. I didn't allow anything, Mace said. It did that on its own. It's got more override protocols than Dennis has passive-aggressive subroutines. Dennis, the coffee machine, hissed in the corner as if on cue. See? Mace muttered. Still bitter about that time I kicked him. I heard that, Dennis snapped. Patty chirped. According to your station's diagnostics, Dennis holds 7 grudges, 3 minor feuds, and 1 philosophical disagreement regarding the ethical consumption of decaf. Mace sighed and sat at the console, dragging one leg up to sit cross-legged. The screen in front of him displayed a soft lattice of star paths, each pulsing with metadata he could now parse as casually as breathing. He didn't try to read it anymore. It simply streamed through him like language, without translation. Any new archive messages? He asked. Patty beeped once. Query thread received 29 minutes ago. Topic: Emotional volatility during crustacean consumption. Ray blinked. Crustacean? Apparently, Patty added, they're fascinated by the concept of beings who risk allergic reactions for the taste of ocean insects. Mace scratched his head. Okay, first off, shrimp are delicious. Second, tell them I don't make the rules of human cuisine, I just suffer through them. Patty recorded the message with a flourish. Ray leaned against the bulkhead, eyes flickering toward Mace. They're learning faster now. You've accelerated the interface growth. I've always been a fast learner. Once took up harmonica for 2 weeks. Almost played a full scale before it exploded. That's a very specific anecdote. It was a very specific harmonica. Turns out, don't trust musical instruments bought from vending machines on Titan. The mood settled. There was a hum in the station, a low, rhythmic pulse that matched the patterns in Mace's dreams. He'd stopped calling them dreams, really. They were more like check-ins. Half memories, archive impulses nudging his thoughts into weird tangents. He'd once woken up mid-sentence, arguing with someone about the optimal ratio of gravity to humor in interstellar diplomacy. He'd been winning the argument. Probably. Ray stepped forward and placed a hand on the console. The data shifted, aligning into a sharp vertical column that glowed a quiet amber. This is new, she said. Mace frowned. What is it? A ping. Not from the archive. From deep space. Trinary signal. Human encoding, mostly. Patty hovered closer, rotating nervously. Coordinates traced to the Cygnus arm. Origin node, unknown. Signal format, partial Earth standard, partial. Reen. Mace blinked. Wait, Reen. Your language. Ree's face tightened just a little. It's not possible. No other Reen constructs were sent beyond the merge protocol. Not without host clearance. Mace leaned forward, heart suddenly louder than usual. Could it be another one like you? No, she said, but not firmly. Maybe. I don't know. Want to investigate? She hesitated. It could be a trap. Mace shrugged. So could lunch. I once ate a ration bar that turned out to be a packaging error. I chewed plastic for 6 minutes and told no one. That explains so much, Patty muttered. Ree's eyes stayed on the signal. It pulsed like a heartbeat. Then she nodded. We'll need to redirect the orbital relay. That's not hard, Mace said, pulling up the control deck. Although I should probably warn Earth Command that I'm about to borrow their antenna. Will they respond? Not unless we attach a pizza order. Even then, it's 50-50. Patty beeped twice. Signal locked. Relay adjusting. The data streamed in. Not words, not audio, just patterns. Familiar and not. Ray stiffened. It's a Reen memory code. Mace's breath hitched. Yours? She shook her head. Not mine. But related. It carries a tone match. You mean like, family? There are no families in the archive sense. But, yes. Close enough. They stared at the signal, watching it pulse in small waves. Patty rotated slowly. Would you like me to attempt message decryption? No, Ray said. Not yet. It could be reactive. We'll need to approach it carefully. Mace rubbed his temples. Let me guess. If we poke the mysterious alien message too hard, it could implode into a pocket of emotion and rewrite our memories as spaghetti recipes? Ray didn't answer immediately. Patty did. Probability, 0.3%. Still safer than Dennis espresso setting. Mace stood up and cracked his neck. All right. New plan, we treat it like a birthday present from a long-lost cousin. Suspicious, but potentially edible. We don't eat archive messages. Speak for yourself. I'm still recovering from the algae sandwich. They began organizing the decoding protocol together, side by side, Patty projecting layers of data while Ray translated glyphs. The signal's pulse steadied. It was waiting. Mace looked out the viewport. I never thought I'd be here, he said. Where? Half alien, half archive, 100% confused, holding hands with a quantum whisper while preparing to call space relatives I didn't know I had. Ray slid a soft smile his way. You forgot the part where your assistant quacks. Patty let out a long, satisfied quack. Mace chuckled. And then the signal blinked green. Whoever, or whatever, was out there, had just responded. The green pulse blinked once more, then dissolved into a stream of symbols that looked vaguely like musical notes played by someone who didn't respect musical scales. Mace stared at the projection, chewing the inside of his cheek, which was now his favorite stress relief method besides passive sarcasm and unsolicited snack reviews. Well, he said, that definitely wasn't a coupon. Patty chirped. Pattern match confirmed. Signal carries partial personality framework, compatible with Reen mental architecture. So, it's a person. Ray nodded, slow and unsure. More like a message that thinks it's a person. But yes. Someone tried to preserve themselves inside the transmission. That's a bold move. I once tried to preserve a sandwich in my locker. It became sentient. No, it didn't. I named it Kyle. Still no. Patty interjected. The entity identifies itself as OLA, message header includes a Reen subdesignation, kinbound. Ray inhaled sharply. Mace looked at her. That means something. It means she's the one who went missing during the early phases. She vanished during a merge. Everyone assumed the host system failed. Mace squinted at the data. So. OLA's been stuck in a bottle out in the Cygnus arm this whole time. Or drifting. Or hiding. Or trying to start a podcast. Ray looked at him. Sorry, he said. That one slipped out. They set the decoding channel to passive listen mode, allowing OLA's presence to thread slowly into the station's lower bandwidth. The data came in stuttered waves at first. Fragments of ideas, broken phrases, scattered sensations. A smell like wind through metal trees. A thought about laughter, half finished. One complete sentence, I remember the warmth of foolish decisions. I think I like her already, May said. Over the next 2 hours, the fragment began stabilizing. The signal wove itself into one of the backup processors, a small corner of the system usually reserved for trivia games and low-stakes poker simulations. The new presence settled in like a polite guest. No sudden surges, no hostile takeovers, no threatening to rewrite reality into edible user manuals. Hey, Ray. Mace asked, fiddling with a diagnostic port. Yes. Do you ever think, this whole thing was less about the archive trying to erase me and more about seeing if I'd accept myself? She blinked. I mean, I spent most of my life feeling like an underqualified maintenance guy who got stuck in space with too many machines and not enough friends. And then you showed up and started poking holes in my mental firewalls and asking cosmic questions like it was Casual Friday. Patty beeped. Cosmic question Casual Friday added to calendar. Thanks, Mace said. He looked back at Ray. But now I've got this weird chorus in my head that thinks in fractal poetry, a duck-shaped data cube, and a potential cousin made of signal static. And somehow /. I feel less alone than I did when it was just me, Greg, and Dennis arguing about mug temperatures. Ree's expression softened. You've changed, she said. Yeah, May said. I have. You were always more than what you believed. I know. I just needed the universe to shout it at me through an alien karaoke session. The console pinged. A new update slid across the screen. OLA had stabilized. Fully conscious. Requesting interaction. Mace glanced at Ray. Should I? Ray nodded. She's not a threat. Patty buzzed. Also, she just complimented your earlier quip about time behaving like burnt toast. That's high praise. Mace grinned and opened the channel. A new voice filtered through, text to thought, soft and amused. You are loud. But in a good way. Mace leaned forward. Hi. I'm Mace. I contain multitudes. Also, a regrettable protein bar. You carry resonance. You also leak joy. It's charming. Thanks. I'm working on it. Ray stepped beside him. Her voice shifted slightly, like the tone she reserved for ancient stories and careful truths. OLA, she said. You disappeared. I wandered. The host was fragile. I didn't want to hurt it. You didn't return. I didn't know how. I thought maybe I could become something new. Mace murmured, been there. But I heard laughter. It echoed across the mesh. I followed it. Patty rotated. That would be the point when Mace tried to convince the archive that human sandwiches were worth existential risk. Look, Mace said, if you can't embrace absurdity, you're just another cosmic spreadsheet with identity issues. OLA laughed. It wasn't sound, it was a ripple in the air, a curl of warmth along the edge of Mace's spine. Somehow, it felt familiar, like an inside joke from someone you hadn't met yet. You want to stay? Mace asked. Yes. Cool, he said. We have coffee. It's terrible. But Dennis makes it with commitment. Reluctant commitment, Dennis muttered from the corner. The station felt lighter. Not physically, but in that weird, unmeasurable way where gravity hadn't changed, but the air itself remembered to smile. Later that night, May stood on the observation deck, watching the stars wink in their slow rhythm. Ray stood beside him, and Patty hummed quietly to itself, composing what it claimed would be a new anthem for technicians who almost became gods but settled for decent company. Think I'll ever go back to Earth? Mace asked. Ray tilted her head. Do you want to? He thought about it. Nah, he said. Too much paperwork. You'll miss toast. I'll survive. You'll miss sarcasm. I am sarcasm. They stood together, wrapped in silence and starlight. Somewhere behind them, OLA sent a pulse through the network, syncing with the archive, not as a lost echo, but as something found. Mace felt it in his chest. I used to be afraid of being overwritten, he said. Now I think I was just afraid of being known. And now? He smiled. Now I'm just afraid Patty will make me do interpretive dance again. I have routines prepared, Patty offered cheerfully. I know, Mace said. You worry me. Then he laughed. Ray laughed. Even Dennis let out a steamy sigh of reluctant amusement. The universe was vast. But somehow, Here, on a lonely moon, surrounded by oddities, glitches, and the impossible, Mace Kellen had finally found home.